Welcome to the Dr. Stacy Show, where we are talking about all things faith, love, and wellness as it relates to raising kids. I'm your host, Dr. Stacy, and today's episode we have with us Bree Samuels. Bree is an educator with 10 years of experience. She has taught at every grade level, including college. She holds a BA in Liberal Studies, a certificate in Global Black Studies and African Studies, and an MS in English and African American Literature. She's also currently a doctoral student, which I don't know how she finds time for all this, but this is amazing, in English. In addition to her role as an educator, she's a high school educator. Bree is also the owner of Sankofa Books, a literacy agency. As an editor, Bree helps writers perfect their craft and prepare literacy projects for publication. She has more than a dozen writers, editors, and published their books, and she even has 3 books of her own published: Emani Takes a Deep Breath, This Loud Silence, and The Writer's Notebook. Bree, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
And I'm so excited. So, folks, I met Bree at a book fair in Greensboro. And I have to say, I'm going to hold up the book. Emani Takes a Deep Breath was one of the things that drew me to Bree and to her table. Bree, tell us a little bit just about who you are and all the things that you do.
Yeah, you pretty much covered it. I'm an educator. I've taught at every grade level, my favorite being elementary school. Currently working on my doctorate, getting really close to that dissertation stage. And I own Sankofa Books, where I help people write, edit, publish their works. It started off as a Black-owned bookstore that celebrated Black voices. And my literary services that I added on to Sankofa Books came from working and publishing some of my own. And I was like, I really want to help other writers do the same. And that's what I do.
I love it. And right now, though, I'm going to talk about your day job, right? Because we all got 3 and 4 jobs. I love it. But
Yeah.
you're an English high school teacher. And
Yes.
I love that you said you've taught at different levels, because this is a great conversation. So parents, please listen up, especially if you have kiddos that struggle with language arts and ELA. I know in my work as a therapist, I always tease, if kids didn't have homework, I probably wouldn't have a job, right? And English homework is one of those subjects that I really feel students struggle with. Bree, tell us a little bit about what have you seen through the years as an educator for some of the challenges with English and writing for students.
Ooh, there are several. That's a long list. But I would say off the top of my head, definitely stamina is one of the first things that comes to mind. It's just an ever increasing problem that I'm seeing, especially at the high school level, where if it takes longer than like 10, 15 minutes, we're checking out. And we can talk about, like technology and phones and TVs and tablets all the day long. And that's definitely a huge problem. Just the screens itself, I think the lights, because books and articles printed on pages is not as stimulating as the screen. So I think that has a lot to do with a lack of stamina, of kind of being able to struggle with the text or even enjoy it because it's not noisy and it's not bright and it's not full of color, just visually. Just stamina, lack of being able to engage critically. But I think ultimately, as students get older, it's how is this going to help me in the real world? How is reading this going to help me in the real world? How is it going to help me earn money? And so all of those things combined, we're just seeing like a lot of people on the internet call it a literacy crisis. And I hate to make it sound so scary, but it is. And so that's just what I've seen in my 10 years so far.
Well, and I've heard of the literacy crisis as well. And I know I see it as a mental health therapist, because oftentimes when the students, right, parents will say they don't want to read. If it takes longer than 10, 15 minutes, absolutely. They're shutting down. They're getting frustrated at home. And I see that, and I'm on the mental health side. So I can imagine as educators what you're seeing even in the classroom. In my book, Love Our Babies Well, we talk about like this relationship between early learning skills and emotional regulation. When you were in the elementary years, what were some of the, I guess, moments that you would see for students that were most difficult when they would come into school with writing and ELA, not just writing, but the reading part as well?
There's this, like that lack of stamina and that lack of sitting with a text and just struggling with it. Okay, the first second that we're running into a word that we can't pronounce or we don't understand, it's time to shut down. Or I'm so frustrated and I can't push through. Like I don't have that grit to just like, let me sit here and try to figure it out. It's that immediate frustration, that immediate checking out. And we can say that kids just don't have the ability to do all of that, but they just haven't been taught that regulation that, okay, I'm frustrated right now. I don't understand it right now. What are some things in my toolbox that I can use to help me get through this? Because I have to learn it at the end of the day. And I think that's a major piece of it. And also no connection to, if I don't learn this word, if I don't understand this, the consequence is that not only do I not get the question right or whatever it is, but also I don't get to learn. So that struggle, that productive struggle is just a struggle. It's not even a struggle anymore. It's like, oh, I can just give up. And students are able to kind of opt out of that because of the way education looks now. So it used to be printed paper, it used to be pencil and paper, and now it's on their Chromebooks, now it's on their screens where they can opt out if they want. They can just move on to the question and keep it moving. So there's no struggle there.
That's interesting because I personally prefer books. I always teach people I have hundreds of books wherever I am, right? Every office I own has like tons of books.
Mhm.
But that difference between screen and being
Mhm.
able to even hold a physical book is really
Mhm.
key. When you think about gender, boys versus girls in a classroom, and that could be elementary through high school, what are you seeing as part of the literacy crisis when it comes to gender?
I think I think that's such a much like a concept we need to zoom out on,
Mhm.
because it's more of this really broad approach of like, well, boys are easier than girls to raise, and that's because not as much effort is put into boys as it is girls. And what that means is like, well, boys will be boys, so they naturally have less attention to pay to things. They have a smaller attention span naturally. They're naturally hyper, they're naturally aggressive, and girls are more mild and girls are quiet, when in reality that idea is how we end up treating them and raising them, so that's how they become. So when we say that girls are better or stronger readers than boys, it's like this nature versus nurture situation happening. And so we believe that that's a preconceived notion, and so we end up raising them like that, and that's what we see in the classroom, not because that's who they are naturally, girls being stronger in literacy than boys, but because we believe that as the adults raising these people, that's how we treat them, and so that's the output that we're seeing. And so that's just like a repeated cycle, when in reality I don't know if we're giving boys the chance to be strong readers, or if we're not pushing them to be as academically adept as we are pushing girls to be.
And I have one of each, right? I have a boy and a girl, and my girl was first. And so my son came along and it came time to reading. It was really interesting because Paxton wanted nothing to do with her reader books, right? Like I got all the book fair books and all the cute packages she had, and he had wanted nothing. So then I finally said, "What do you want to read?" And he's like, "Mommy, I want Cars and Scooby Doo." And so I had to actually change the books
Mhm.
to read. But it's fascinating that you said even parent expectation of boys by gender, we do
Mhm.
kind of just let them slide and let them play more than when it comes to the academic side. But I was determined because one of the things back to school nights, I would always hear from his teachers, well, he's a great reader and he asks lots of questions. Because I was like, no, they're 14 months apart. They both were experiencing the same thing. She went to the library, he went to the library. She was
Mhm.
writing a paper, he was writing a paper. So that's a really interesting point. And not to blame parents, because I know even pre-show, you and I were kind of talking about this perspective that people say, oh, well, it's the parents' fault, or it's the school's fault, or it's, grandma's fault. It's somebody's fault other than the child's. But how do we, even at an early age, what should we be doing as parents to really help the reading and the literacy part?
As a teacher, I think the best, and I'm not a parent yet, but as a teacher, I think one of the best things parents can do is be as involved as possible. Know what your student is working on, what unit, what standards that they're focusing on in ELA class, if not all classes, but especially when it comes to reading. And look at those standards and know where your teacher is pushing your child to be, and copy and paste it at home. work on that at home. Get extra practice books. Get the books that your child is interested in reading. Read to them. Have them read to you. There's a whole bunch of scientific studies out there that shows that when parents read to kids when they're young, they become stronger readers, critical thinking skills are stronger, all the things. And it can be really just as simple as I'm going to read my book to my child and I'm going to make sure my voice inflection changes. I pause at commas, I stop at periods, I get loud at exclamation points. That way, when they see it in the classroom, those punctuation marks, and the more they hear and see um, works that are correctly written, the more their writing is going to reflect that. Because we become strong writers when we're exposed to more reading. We're just copying and pasting what we see our favorite authors do in our own writing. That's just what happens naturally.
I
So
love.
the more we read and the more we hear reading, the better writers we become as well. So when we hear mom, dad, whoever's taking care of us at home reading to us, not only do we get like build those really good habits, but hearing it is just as important.
Yeah, and some of that research, when we look at the fact that you even have books in your home, right? There's the home environment studies that look at, do we have not toys, but I mean, not just toys, but do we have toys? Do we have books?
Yeah.
Do we have learning? But even to see your parents read, we were on a cruise just recently, my kids and we're waiting to get off the boat. And I look over and my daughter, who actually asked us at one of the stops to go to a bookstore so she could get a book for the cruise. Then she was sitting there, just sitting with her book, waiting to get off, and she's reading. And I just think about like now she's in college, and that's still part of who she is, right? She wants to read for fun, even on vacation, because again, books were in the home. We did things like the inflection in the voice. I love it. I say the baby talk is real, y'all. You have to do it. You have to make the characters. Elmo
Yes.
sounds, and the cars have noises, and
Yeah.
helps with brain connection, even to what they're reading, which it's not about entertainment, but really, again, we learn through the senses. And so even that sound part helps kids to get engaged in the reading and the learning. So, Brie, I want to switch gears for a second because I have so many things I want to ask you about. My question list keeps getting longer, but you took this love for reading and then you turned it into your own business. Talk a little bit about Sankofa Books and what you do for people in that space that want to be writers or who are illustrators, all the things that you do, even in that space to help support reading.
Yeah, just piggybacking on of what you just shared with having books in the home. I was fortunate to have access to books. Like I would ask my dad all the time to take me to Barnes and Noble. I think like once a week we had it scheduled, and he would take me to Barnes and Noble, and I would use my allowance, and I'm buying books, and that was just a way. For me, there was a lot of escapism involved. It was just right. Reading was always just fun for me. But having gone to a school where I was one of very few Black kids, what I was reading at school and what I was reading at home didn't have any representation of my heritage, my culture, anybody who looked like me. Just I didn't know anything about it. So when I went to high school, I had my first Black teacher, and he was my English teacher. And I remember I chose to read Maya Angelou's poem for the Million Man March, and I was just inspired to dive into Black writers. And ever since then, that's been all I've read, except for what I've been required to read in school and whatnot. And so discovering my love for reading, yes, but like reading in works that represent who I am and my experiences as a Black woman, has just been very, very important to me. It's been the crux of my life's work, I would say. And so I wanted to create a space with Sankofa Books where it is celebratory of Black voices and stories. And so making sure that people who may have been like me, who didn't grow up with people like other kids in the class or the school who look like them, or access to any of the things that we might have created in culture, like as far as literacy, those people have access to find out more about Black writers. And so that's how Sankofa Books started, and it shifted into my literary services because I'm like, okay, now I have this space where people can come find out about Black writers. What about voices out there who are writing stories, or they want to, whatever they're writing, but they don't know the avenues to take. They don't have the resources. How can I make that more accessible? And that's how we got the literary agency. That's how I became an editor.
And I'm going to put these two things together for our listeners, right? Because you just nailed it. Representation matters in
Oh, for
books.
sure.
Part of why, and I'll just speak for my own daughter, for example, she wants to read books by Black and Brown authors, right?
Mhm.
She's seeking that out. That's the section we go to when she goes to the bookstore,
Mhm.
because one of the connection pieces, and I hear it all the time from students, is that's not my world. I can't relate to that. This isn't
Right,
my story. And
right.
so the more that we are allowing authors to create stories that look like our students, the
Mhm.
more we're going to engage them in the reading process as well. I love
Mhm.
that you said you were able to pick what you could read, because
Mhm.
that becomes a challenge too in English and the curriculum. And where we're forcing, again, I say forcing students to
Mhm.
read certain books where they're like, oh, we can't even go to that side of the library. And to get those books off the shelves, we
Mhm.
read this, right? And so, and that is where it becomes hard for students to engage, right, when they can't even connect with the story. I tease the kiddos and I'm like, oh, I read that book when I was in 11th grade, 30 years ago. Like, what are
Yeah,
we doing? Like,
yeah.
literature has changed, English has
Mhm.
changed. And I love that you had an English teacher, again, that was Black, because that's also something that when we talk about how many educators do we have. I had one Black biology teacher in high school my entire K through 12 years.
Mhm.
And that part alone inspired me, even in sciences and things like that. But that's important. We have educators too.
Mhm.
Talk to me a little bit, because not only do you provide from a business perspective, but then you started doing your own writing. And
Mhm.
I'm going to kind of segue into, because I love this book, Emani Takes a Deep Breath.
Mhm.
Talk to us a little bit about the story, what was behind Emani. Is Emani a real kiddo? Like, just tell us about the story.
I wrote this book when I was teaching fourth grade. I think I was in my second or third year. And my school, it was a charter school, they brought in this great social emotional learning curriculum. And it was a toolbox. And in this toolbox, kids could reach in and pull out different coping things to help them self regulate, cope, get through whatever it is that they're experiencing, all these big emotions. And of course, when you're a fourth grader, when you're 9 or 10 years old, there's a whole bunch of things to feel really big things about. And I was really inspired. I even got it like one of the tools tattooed, which was the breathing tool. And I have experience with anxiety ever since I was very, very, very little, all the way up to now. And so when I got to teach this social emotional learning curriculum, I was like benefiting from it myself as a teacher. And I thought it was amazing. And the breathing tool was actually the box breathing that people, you might be familiar with it as a therapist, but it's something that as a person who has struggled with anxiety that I've learned from different counseling therapists, whatever resources. And so the book really came through a conversation with my best friend. He is Emani. And we were talking about dealing with anxiety as little kids, coming from similar backgrounds where discipline was really big and our parents really didn't understand anxiety. And so you kind of got in trouble and beat for a lot of things. And so we were having this conversation about, well, what if our parents did know about these tools? What if our parents were um, more progressive and understanding? And what if they had the space to kind of be a little bit more present and help us through working through these big feelings? And so he was in mind when I wrote this story. In the book, Little Imani, he experiences big feelings of all types, positive and negative, and then he uses this breathing tool to kind of help him through it. But also his parents help him through this breathing tool. They help him use it in different aspects as well. So this was a story for my best friend and for all of us who kind of may have had some big feelings too when we were little, but they weren't received well. It was seen as like more of a problem, something that could probably be disciplined out of you rather than embraced and given tools for.
So we're going to go there because I love what you just said. Right? listen,
Mhm.
listen, listeners, we have to understand that big emotions don't always need discipline. Big
Yeah.
emotions need understanding. Big emotions need self-regulation and helping your child to regulate through co-regulation, right?
Mhm.
I say just because they have big emotions don't mean you have to have big emotions. And
Yeah.
that's the key in parenting. But one of the things I like about your story with Amani is I'm seeing the moments in your story that I see as a therapist, like when he's in the
Mhm.
middle of a math test, when he's can't sleep at night and the thoughts of the spelling bee is going through his mind, because a lot of children struggle with sleep. And
Mhm.
so I love that in your book, you actually take the tool and put it to specific moments
Mhm.
throughout, because I always say to folks, having a coping skill is great, but if you don't know when to use it,
Right.
so this is the great thing about this book, is that it gives children and parents
Mhm.
different scenarios and different moments that, right, is kind of age appropriate to say, hey, when we're outside and we lose a game. And I'm thinking about how many clients where recess, their strong emotions come at recess when it's gaga, four squares. I can name the
Yep.
game.
Yep.
Tag, football, when they don't get tagged in or no one wants them on their team. And
Mhm.
so we see those strong emotions. And so Imani takes a deep breath, really helps us to connect those moments. Was it intentional that Imani was a boy in the story?
Yes, not only because he's a guy in real life, but I was when I was teaching fourth grade, I was noticing my boys were having these huge outbursts emotionally with, for different reasons, and there was just no. It was so explosive, and they were receiving consequences, and so without really knowing, well, your feeling is okay, but this is what we need to do instead of exploding. And so it kind of came through that.
Yeah, and I share, and even in my book, Love Our Babies Well, how my son, when I first was introduced, he went from a small private school to a regular public school. And by the third day of school, I get this letter from the principal's office saying that if he has this behavior again, he's going to get suspended. And so when I asked the teacher, I'm like, what behavior? It was crying. He
Oh,
actually had anxiety and was crying all day because he missed his mama. And I said, if this was a white girl that was missing her mom, would she
yeah.
have gotten the same letter? And the principal just looked at me. But it was just very, again, reflective of the moments that we look at gender even
Yeah.
before, to say, how do we perceive that behavior? Gender
Yeah.
comes in first, race comes in definitely,
Mhm.
before we say, hey, is this kid maybe anxious?
Yeah.
He's saying, I miss my mom. Like literally,
Right.
the teacher reported, and I said, so he's crying saying he misses the mom, but y'all are going to suspend him. Help me to understand, how does that help him manage those strong emotions? And so
Oof.
I appreciate, I know, listen, it was a hard year, but my baby's in college right now and he's doing well and amazing. So I'm grateful.
Yay.
But even advocating and learning how to advocate for your kids to be able to use these types of tools in school is also key.
Yeah.
I did a lot with teaching them. For example, he would get visually overwhelmed and overstimulated with how much words were on a paper. Or if
Yeah.
the math worksheets had like 40 problems and the writing was so small, and I'd be like, okay, can you make the print bigger and separate those problems out? And he'll be more relaxed, right?
Right.
So even how it visually looked for them caused
Mhm.
strong emotions. And so I
Mhm.
love that you really were intentional about Imani being a Black boy, but also being a boy, because these, again, giving our boys tools is really key.
Right.
So, Bree, as we're kind of going into the end here, what would be kind of that final thought or something that you would say, whether related to emotions or literacy, English? What would be something kind of your takeaway for parents today?
I think for the adults who are taking care of kids, whether it's teachers or parents at home or whatever, I think one really important thing is to just recognize how different the world is from when we were our children's age, our students' age, and not get so stuck on, well, when I was this age, this is how it looked, because it's just different. It's different from 5 years ago when we were going through the pandemic. It's different, just from a year before that to a year after that. So not to get stuck there, but be progressive in understanding, and what does education look like now, what does reading look like now, and what works best for your child, for your student, and get them engaged as much as possible, ask them as many questions as possible. It's so clear that students' brain, their chemistry and how they learn has changed, but the education system has not changed with that. So I think there's that, learning your child as an individual. At school, we have these plans that we can help with what's the word, accommodations.
Mhm.
Help your student with what they need to learn as best as possible, and we're there to serve your child. So learn what that is. Like you mentioned, your babies were getting anxious because the font was super small. That's something that makes me anxious. So,
Yeah.
so as a teacher, that's something I understand. So, I think that's the best takeaway that I can give, just being in the classroom. Get involved as much as possible.
I love that. And parents, listen, we know we share this responsibility with our educators, and just going in with that perspective is so huge. Bree, I thank you for that. All right, so Bree, this is something I do with all of my guests on the show, and we have to have our humor joke of the day, our Laffy Taffy. I have my piece of candy. I was like, "Where's my joke?" Here it is. All right, so I have my Laffy Taffy joke. We're gonna give this a try, okay? Let's see if you can
Okay.
get it. All right. So, what three letters hold a lot of data? What three letters holds a lot of data?
DNA?
Oh, that's close. That's a good one though. It's
What is it?
USB. USB. But listen, I don't know.
Oh,
I might have to write to the Laffy Taffy people and say, you know what? DNA is a great answer too.
but USB is funny because that's true. It's the little sticky thing you put. Oh my gosh.
I love that. So, Bree, tell folks, how can they get in touch with you? Where are your socials? Where can they find your books? Give them all your handles.
Okay, so on Instagram, I am at Bri Reads. That's BRI Reads, like a book. Same thing on Twitter. It's now called X. Sankofa Books, at Sankofa Books on Instagram, as well as TikTok. And TikTok, Read with Bri as like a personal page. But my website for Sankofa Books is sankofabooks.net. You can send me an email through there. You can find me through social media and on Google and stuff like that. Just send a DM, send a message if you would like to connect.
I love it. Thanks, Bree. So, folks, before we go, we have our Love Our Babies Well segment today. And we've talked a lot today about reading and literacy. And I'm going to say boys need help too. Sometimes we forget that our boys are in need of support with their strong feelings. We're quick to label a boy as being disruptive or bad when learning is tough, versus seeing them as maybe overwhelmed, anxious, or maybe just needing extra help. Do we recognize that our boys are doing the best they can with their emotions? Or do we expect something different? Because, like Bree said, boys are just boys. The boys don't cry, or boys shouldn't show emotions. Those old conversations, well, they're hurting our boys. And they're making them turn those strong feelings inward, which oftentimes turns into anger and frustration. Let's learn to use, like Emani, some deep breathing, techniques, coping skills. Let's have great conversations and safe conversations to help our boys. And let's make it safe and inclusive space where even emotions for boys is allowed to help them heal. Thank you so much, everybody, today for tuning in. Make sure to grab a copy of Love Our Babies Well on Amazon. Thank you for tuning in. Until next time, keep the faith, love the babies, and pursue wellness.